When you print off your worksheet, if you'd like something repeated at the top or bottom of every page, known as headers and footers, so the heading of each page is in the heading section, and at the bottom and the footing of each page is the footer, like maybe you want the author's name on every page, logo, date, page numbers, you can do it one of a couple of ways. You can either come up here, click on the File tab and go Backstage down to Print, and then just come down here and click on the Page Setup link, and there you go, Header and Footer tab. It gives you a preview up at the top when you want to add a header by clicking on Custom Header or Custom Footer with the preview down below. So you can either bring it up here, or if you're not Backstage, click Cancel. Let's click the back arrow, go to the Page Layout tab, go down to the Page Setup group, and click on its expandable dialog box button there. And then you've got the same tab here. So to add a custom header for the header section, go ahead and click on Custom Header. And you get 3 sections up at the top of every page that what you put in one, again, repeats at the top of every page. So in the left section, let's go ahead and put in the author's name. That's me, thank you. And then you got these buttons here, like when you hover over that one, it should say Font to format your font. That inserts a page number, number of pages, date, time, and so forth. Just hover over them. I'm going to go ahead and select my name because I want to customize it or format it by clicking on the Font button and saying, okay, we're big, bold, and beautiful. Let's do size 14. Give myself a fancy color and say, that's good, okie dokie. Ooh, that's nice. Go ahead and click OK, and hey, there's a preview of it. And then let's go ahead and add a custom footer. Click on that. And let's say in the bottom right section, we want to go ahead and add the date. Click on that, adds the date code, which means it's the code for today's date. So if I created this like several years ago and I add the code, it won't have the date for several years ago, but today's date, or whatever date you open it up in and print it off, it's going to be today's. So go ahead and click OK, and hey, there we go. And then you can go ahead and click on Print Preview to see what it looks like, and in the top of every page, or the first page, got my name, the bottom, the date. Click on it to zoom in, and then scroll over and down to see today's date. And then let's go to page 2, click on it to zoom out, there's today's date and my name. Nice. Let's go ahead and hit the back arrow. Now that's one way. Another way is to come up here and click on the Insert tab and go to the text group. Let me click on it and click on Header and Footer. Now when you click on it, it's going to take you to a different view, not the normal view, but the page layout view, but in header and footer format here. So when I click on it, you can see I'm in a different view. In fact, if you come up here and click on the View tab and you want to get out of this view, you can't do it. No, I'm kidding. Well, you can't do it as long as you have your cursor flashing in one of the 3 header sections or footer sections. So if you click out, hey, guess what? You can get out of the page layout, which is highlighted because that's the view that we're in, and go to the normal view. But if you come up here and you click anywhere in the header or footer section, it freezes and it says, you can't make any changes because what you're working on right now is up here on the Design tab, Header and Footer Tools. Or you can go ahead and come here, but I suggest that you take a look at this because you get a lot of features that can help you out with what you may want to add to your header or footer sections. So like for example, maybe over to the far right section, we could add the current time. Let's go ahead and stamp it. Boom, adds the code. And then let's go ahead and add a picture. You can add a logo if you want. It's the same thing, but it's going to be a picture. So in any case, come up here, Header and Footer Elements group, and click on Picture, Picture. You can go ahead and search the internet or browse on your computer. Click on Browse. I'm going to go to the desktop and find my computer beep. Double click. And you won't be able to see him. You just get the code for that picture until you click outside of it. And hey, there he is. There's my beep. And he's playing on a very old computer. In any case, looking at that picture, I'm thinking a couple of things. Okay, that's close to the top. How about if I go ahead and push it down and bleach it or wash it out so it's not so dark that I can't see the data in front of it? So to do that, go ahead and click back up in here. Come back up to the Design tab and click on Format Picture. Now make sure that you got picture selected, the coding, and then go ahead and click on Format Picture. You can change the size of it, so if you want this guy to be a bit smaller or larger on the spreadsheet, then go ahead and change the height. And when you change the height, it'll change the width. So if I go smaller, because it's in locked aspect ratio, what you do to the height to keep it proportion also keeps the width in check, so you don't have something that when you change the height and make it smaller that the width is still the same, so it looks like he's being crushed. In any case, let's go to the Picture tab and change the color from automatic to washout. And that gives us the options down below for brightness and contrast. At default, 85% brightness and 15% contrast. If you want something brighter or something more contrasting between the pixels, then go ahead and play with that. Otherwise, go ahead and click Okie dokie and let's see where we're at. Hey, that's not too bad. I can kind of see them in the background, but it's not getting in the way of the data where it's so bold that it's hard to detect the data here or define it. And then if I want to be able to push the picture down, then go ahead and click in front of the code, hit enter, 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 and enter. That's pretty good. And then click off and hey, it gets pushed down. Cool. Now if I'm up here in the header section, go back up to the related contextual design tab, and I want to jump down to the footer because I want to add like page numbers so I can tell what page we're on after we print it off. You can either scroll down to the bottom of it or come up here to the navigation group and click on Go to Footer, goes to the bottom of page 1, or Go to Header, goes to the top of page 1, back and forth and back and forth. And let's go ahead and click in the left section and add some page numbers. Come back up here to the Header and Footer Elements group, click on Page Number, there's the code. But the problem that I run into with this is that it just gives me the page number and not the number of pages. I want a combination of both because when I print this off, when I hand off the first page to somebody and they go, oh, page 1, that's nice, they wouldn't know that there's a page 2 unless, let me hit the space bar, I type in of, and hit the space bar again, and enter in the number of pages in this worksheet. There's 2 pages, so it's going to say page 1 of 2 pages. Now what you do in one will duplicate in all the others, so this is all on page 1, right? So it should update to page 2, and you can tell up at the top on page 2. In the header section we added the current time. Well, the current time's at the top of page 2, so if I go ahead and scroll down, at the bottom of page 2 should also be in the footer section the page number and number of pages that are to be printed, and then also the current date. And then of course you can always customize these codes if you like. Click in there, click and drag to select it in the mini formatting toolbar. Bold, change the color to something, ooh, green's fun, and then click off. And then finally, let me go ahead and scroll to the top, page 1. You have the different options of different first page, meaning that whatever you put in the header or footer of the first page is not going to be duplicated into the other pages. So let's go ahead and check it. Different first page clears it out, but down below on page 2, it keeps on to the data there because the first page is different. Let's go ahead and click back up in the header section and uncheck it so it can duplicate what's on page 2 back up into here. You also have different odd and even pages. So when I check that, notice that page 1 is going to be odd, and then go down to page 2 because that's an even number. Click up here, it says even page header, so it doesn't duplicate over, so you have different odd and even pages. So think of it like a book. Typically on the first page of the book, the title page, you don't have a heading or a footer, so you have a different first page. And then when you're in the middle of the book reading, up at the top of the left page, you may have the author's name. Then on the right page, the current chapter that you're in. So you get those different odd and even pages. Well, that's what we're talking about here. In any case, let's go ahead and uncheck it. If we're done, to get out of this view, you need to get out of the header or footer section because up here on the View tab, you don't get that option. So you got to click out into a cell here, and then you can go ahead and see that it's now highlighted or emboldened for us to go to the normal view. If I go back to the page layout and I go to, again, for emphasis, like a header or a footer section, it's focusing on you making changes to the header or footer, so it doesn't allow you to get out of there. To get out of there, you got to get out of there. You got to click outside the header or the footer section and then go to the normal view and Control Home, and then to see what it looks like in Print Preview before we print it off to make sure we got our headers and footers, because those aren't going to show in the normal view. Just in the page layout here, or File, down to Print, in the Print Preview. Hey, there's the picture of the little kid. Go ahead and click on it to zoom in, and that's okay. Click on it to zoom out. So we have my name, the current time, page 1 of 2, and then the date, and then on page 2 of 2, and everything else that we had. Duplicating in the header section and in the footer section on every page that we're printing out. Now, when you print off a page, it doesn't print it just like you see it here. So at the top of the page, you got Dreamforce and you got no padding. Those are called margins. And if you come up here and click on the File tab, go down to Print, you can see over in the Print Preview, you've got some padding there, some space. That's your top margin, padding to the left, left, and right margins in the bottom. If you want to go ahead and try to squeeze more data onto your page, like if you have another column, go ahead and try to tweak your margins like the left and right, make them smaller so you can add another column. To do that, you can do it, well, while you're here in the Print Preview area. Go down and click on the Page Setup link. Go to the Margins tab, and there you go. You've got your top, bottom, left, and right. You get a little preview window so you get an idea of what it's going to be looking like, where the margins are at. So if I go ahead and toggle all the way up to maybe 5 inches from the top, and let's say the left, we do, maybe an inch. Well, see, if you want 1.5 inches, and by using the spin dials, it doesn't get you there, then go ahead and type over it, and then click OK and see what it looks like. Oh, look at all that padding. Well, that's going to push everything over several pages and give me a lot of blank space. So if I go to page 2, you get that padding for the margin, the top margin, on every single page. And that's not working for me. So we can go ahead and either go back to the Page Setup link, or you can click on the drop-down arrow here, and you can see that the last custom setting is the one that we have now for the margins, or pick one of these built-in ones, like if you want the top to be 3/4 of an inch and the bottom left and right, or you can go down to Custom Margins. Brings up the same Page Setup window, and you got your Margins tab, or you can go ahead and click Cancel. In the lower right-hand corner in the Print Preview, you can show the margins. And here you can actually click and drag and move your margins around. So if you don't like it right there, just go ahead and hover over the top margin until you can see arrows pointing up and down. Click and drag and push it up some more. And that looks about right. But if you're like, I want it to be exactly 1 inch, you can look over to the left-hand side, and you can see now it's at left 1 inch. When I click and drag it and move it over a little bit more, it updates it to 0.83. So that's for the left and right. If you want to get the top and bottom exactly right as far as numerically, maybe exactly 3/4 of an inch, then you're back to your Page Setup and going to the Margins tab, and we can go, well, let's just go 1 and then 1. Let's do 1 for all of them. Left, type in 1, right, type in 1, and click OK. Now something's going on here because instead of 2 pages, I've got 3. When I go to the 3rd page, I'm like, well, there's nothing there. Sometimes it bumps it just enough that it'll actually create a 3rd blank page, and to get around that, we've got to shrink our left and right margins because apparently it's creating that 3rd blank page. So if I come over here and click and drag this over just a little bit, I still have 3 pages. How about the right over just a little bit? Okay, a little bit more. Hey, there we go. Now we finally are able to fit this all on 2 pages and not 3. Now you can do it backstage here, or if you don't want to go backstage, and by the way, to turn off the Show Hide Margins, click on Show Margins to turn them off. Let's click the back arrow. You go to the Page Layout tab, and you can click on the expandable dialog box button for Page Setup. You get the same window. You just have to click on the Margins tab, or close out. You can click on the Margins drop-down arrow, get the last custom setting, and also some defaults, or you can go to Custom Margins. Brings up the same Page Setup window, but it takes you right to the Margins tab of the window. And then, of course, you can go ahead and make your changes there as well. And in addition to that, you can center the data. If it doesn't fit all on one page, you can do it horizontally and vertically. So if you just have it filling up half a page, do it vertically and it shifts it down. So it's in the middle vertically or in the middle horizontally. So it shifts it over. So if I do a Print Preview, and let's go to page 2, well, the remainder of the data gets shifted down, positioned vertically, so it's in the middle of it. It's kind of hard to tell, but it's positioning it with the margins that we've got horizontally. And then, of course, from this window, you can click Page Setup, go to Margins, and uncheck that, and do whatever else you need to do to tweak it. Another way to control the amount of data to be printed on a page, besides working with your page orientation or margins, are inserting page breaks. And to view them, to insert them, remove them, just come up here, click on the View tab, go to the Workbook Views group, and the view that we're currently in, the default view is normal, but we want to go to Page Break Preview. Click on it, and there you go. Wherever you see a dashed line, the vertical and horizontal, those are page breaks. And you can see the watermark, that's page 1, everything that's going to be printed on page 1. Then down below page 2, and then it goes up and over to the right with page 3, and you can't see the watermark because the area is smaller, so is the watermark, and then down to page 4. So what it's saying is that it can squeeze these many columns onto the first page, and the others that it can't will have to wait until after it takes care and addresses the first several columns. So when it goes to the next page, a continuation of the data for those columns, and it finishes it off, then it'll go ahead and go to the cutoff columns and put that on a page after it finishes with these, which is going to be page 3. and then work with that until it goes down to page 4 and it finishes those 2 last columns. Now you can work with your page breaks here if you want to move them around. For example, I want more space on page 1 than page 2. So in this example, you can see that it breaks right below number 46, Lance Boyle. If I want to break it above it, then go ahead and hover over the horizontal page break until you can see arrows pointing up and down. Click and drag it and move it above, and then it converts from a dashed line to a solid line. The dashed lines are the default page breaks for Excel. When I manipulate it and turns it to a solid, that means it's a page break that I modified. So I can tell the difference between the two. And that will come into play in just a minute. But right now, we now have Lance Boyle at the top of page 2 and not at the bottom of page 1. You want to verify that besides what you see in here? Okay. Go ahead and click on the File tab, go backstage down to Print, go over to the Print Preview, and down at the bottom, number 46 isn't there, it's number 45, Kyle Purple. So if I go over to page 2 up at the top, there you go, 46, Lance Boyle. Okay, maybe you can't see it. Let's go ahead and click on it to zoom in. There we go, Lance Boyle. So let's go ahead and go back. And let's talk about removing page breaks before we go into inserting them. And to remove them, you can do it one of a couple of ways. If it's a default page break, one that Excel has set up, then the only way to remove it is by hovering over it until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, and then you can click and drag it all the way over to the right until it disappears. But the problem with that, let me come up here and click on the Page Layout tab, go to the Scale Fit group, is that it shrinks the font so it can fit everything, as you can see, onto one page by not cutting off the last 2 columns as we saw before we removed that vertical page break. So now the data is 81% of its original size. It's a lot smaller. And then another way to remove a page break, if it's one that you modified or manipulated or inserted, if it's a solid line, is instead of clicking and dragging it off, is that you can actually click below that line if it's horizontal, or to the right of it if it's vertical. So since it's horizontal, and instead of clicking and dragging it off, you can come up here, click on the Page Layout tab, go to the Page Setup group, click on Breaks, and select Remove. Now when you do that, it adjusts it here, and it goes to the default that Excel has set up to adjust to the scale to fit 81%. So it didn't remove it completely, it just removed your modification of it when we moved it up one to put Lance Boyle at the top of page 2. So if I want to remove Excel's page break, the one that's dashed, I can't do it this way by clicking below it and coming up here and clicking on Breaks to remove it. It won't work. I have to click and drag it off completely in order for it to accept it. But if it's a solid line, one again that I modified or inserted, then I can go ahead and use it. But for me, it's just easier to click and drag than to come up here and click on it once to go down to remove it. Okay, so right now, to fit everything, it looks like onto one page, the font is shrunk down to 70% of normal size. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like before we print it off by going to the Print Preview, click on File, go down to Print, and then go ahead and click to zoom in. Ugh, that was zoomed in. Ugh. Let's go ahead and click on it to zoom in, and ooh, that's pretty tiny. Gonna need a magnifying glass to be able to read that. I mean, it's somewhat legible here, but I don't like squinting to that size of font. So if you want to go ahead and change it back, you can do it within the Print Preview. There it is, Custom Scaling. Click on it, go down to Custom Scaling Options. Opens up the Page Setup window, which, by the way, you can close out of that and just click on Page Setup. Opens up the same window, and on the Page tab, you can see that it's been adjusted to 70% of normal size. In here, you can go ahead and type in 100 to get it back up to normal size and click Okie dokie, in which case it adds the page breaks because it can't fit everything onto one page at that size. So instead of page 1, we go to page 2, page 3. In any case, let's go back to our page break preview, and you can see we're back to where we started with the Excel page breaks that it put in, the horizontal and vertical, with our quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4, representing the different pages. Now let's go ahead and change the orientation up here in the Page Setup group from Portrait to Landscape. And because we have more width in our pages, it fits all the columns, and the only breaks we get is, well, just below James Dean. So we have less space vertically, but more space horizontally, and it can print out on 2 pages now. Now let's say that I want to go ahead and adjust this so I have maybe on page 1 that amount of data, page 2 here, and then add another page break to have a third page for this amount of data. So to do this, I can go ahead and click and drag that up and insert another page break, but you want to keep in mind that to insert a page break, if you want to insert one right there horizontally, that whatever cell you have selected, that when you insert it, is going to insert a break above and to the left of it. So that means it's going to insert both a horizontal and a vertical break. To make sure you don't insert a vertical break, if you just want a horizontal one, then you want to go over to the far left-hand column. So when you insert it, it inserts it above it, but is there anywhere it can go to the left-hand side? No, because there's not a column, so that's how you get your horizontal without getting a vertical. For example, let me go ahead and select the cell right here and come up on the Page Layout tab, Page Setup Group, Breaks to Insert Page Break, and ooh, that's pretty crazy, see? It inserted a break above and to the left, my horizontal and vertical page breaks of that cell that I had selected. So let's go ahead and undo that and click and drag that guy up and then come down here and insert a break, a horizontal break, so I got to be in the leftmost cell or the first column to insert a horizontal break, and come up here, Breaks, to insert page break, and cool. And then if I want to go ahead and insert a vertical break, you want to come up here where I don't want to insert a vertical and a horizontal break, then you want to be in the topmost cell. But the problem with that is that, well, you see that's a merged cell. And so I can't, like if I want to insert a vertical break in cell H1, so it's just to the left of it, because if I come down here and select that cell, it'll be to the left of it, but above it will be inserted horizontal. Again, whatever cell you have selected, it inserts one to the left and above it. And I don't want one above, so I go to the topmost cell. So let's go ahead and right-click on the cell, go down to Format Cells, to the Alignment tab, and remove Merge Cells, and click Okie dokie. And the alignment for A1 is now centered. Let's go to the Home tab and say we want to align it to the left so I can see the name Dreamforce. And then I can go ahead and select cell H1 and then come back up here to the Page Layout tab, to Breaks, to insert a page break, and it inserts a break to the left and above the cell. But because there's nothing above it, because I'm already in the first row, it just adds a break over to the left-hand side of it. Now, not only can you insert and remove page breaks in the page break preview, you can also do it in the normal view, but I prefer it here because you can really tell where the page breaks are. So to do that, just come up here, click on the View tab, go to the Workbook Views group, and change it from page break to normal. And in fact, you can see that break coming down in between columns G and H. All you have to do is go ahead and click on the right-hand side of the vertical break, and then come up here, click on the Page Layout tab, go to the Page Setup group, click on Breaks, and remove it, and it's gone. But over here we get the dashed line. The solid line there was my page break that I worked with, that I inserted or manipulated. For example, that dashed line, when I go back to the page break preview, is going to be Excel's way of saying, okay, in page orientation, you can fit a few more columns. But if I click and drag that out and manipulate its default, it'll turn from a dashed line to a solid line. So in other words, you can tell the difference between your page breaks and Excel's. Excel's are dashed, your page breaks are going to be a solid line. And then by the same token, you can also insert a page break. Again, you want to be mindful of what cell you have selected because it'll insert a break above and to the left of the cell. So both a horizontal and a vertical, unless of course you get right up and hug the top row to insert just a vertical, or hug the leftmost column to insert just a horizontal. So if I come over here and say breaks to insert page break, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got a break, a vertical one right here to the left of it, and above it right there, the horizontal. So let's go ahead and undo that or remove it, and then go up at the top so we can just insert a page break, a vertical one to the left of the cell by breaks to insert page breaks, and I just get the vertical one because there's nothing above that cell, so there's no horizontal. Ooh, this is going to be fun. Let's go ahead and take a look. File, down to Print, Preview. Let me click on it to zoom out. There's page 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6. Well, nonetheless, you get the point. Now, with all those page breaks that I added, if you want extra space for those pages, maybe when you print them off, you can analyze some data like on page 2. Then you can have in your meeting people make comments below here, but make sure if you don't see the labels for each of your columns, the titles, or for your rows, you can watch my print titles training video. There are a couple ways you can go about printing off a range of cells. Like if I don't want to print off this worksheet, just the range that I have selected here, select it, and then go ahead and click on File, go down to Print, and you can see it wants to select the active sheet, the sheet that you have selected, out of your workbook. So if you have 4, 5, or 6 worksheets and you select sheet number 5, you'd see that over here because that's the one you have selected. That makes it active. But instead, click on the drop-down arrow. You can print the entire workbook, or what we have selected. So click on Print Selection and there it is. Cool. Let's go ahead and hit the back arrow. If you want to do multiple selections, then hold down the Control key and click here, 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 and drag there. So I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 selections. Let's see how it handles it in the print preview. Click on File, go down to Print, and you can see that we've got a page for each selection. So each selection gets its own page. Yay! Let's go ahead and go back. Now you can imagine that after I close out of this, if I want to print the same area, I have to reselect it, and that can be very annoying. So instead, let's go ahead and set those areas to always print when I go to print. To set it, come up here and click on the Page Layout tab, and with my selection, come up here and click on Print Area to set it. Then click off, and I don't know if you can see it, but you've got this thin line that goes around the first print area, then that cell, which is the second, third, fourth, and fifth. Let's see if it works. Click on the File tab, go down to Print. Hey, where's my print areas? Of course it's not going to show it because my current selection is the print selection, and what I have selected is the cell that contains the number 35. Go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow and go back to Active Sheet, and on the Active Sheet we have a total of 5 selections that we set, and it's one for each page, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Great, it works. Let's go back, and then to clear it, just come up here and click on Print Area, go down to Clear Print Area, and then another way to go about setting your print areas, if you select a few right here, and you come up here and you set it, and you have additional ones, but it's not within your view here. You want to scroll down or over to find it. Then once you find it, go ahead and click to select those ranges that you want to add to it, and then come up here and click on Print Area to add. And then once you add it, then we can go ahead and go File, down to Print, and see we have a total again 5 selections, so one for each page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. Let's go back, and then let's go ahead and clear it. And Control Home to go back to the beginning of the worksheet, cell A1. And the next feature that I want to talk about, actually I already talked about it in the previous training video, but not in detail, I want to cover here is called scaling. So when it comes to printing off our worksheets, if it can't all be fit onto one page, for example, you can see that when I went to the print preview and came out of it, it shows me now my page breaks. So you've got the dashed line here that says it's cutting off after hours and not including rate and gross onto page 1. And when I scroll down, I've got my horizontal page break that cuts off those columns over there, but continues the data of the columns that it can fit onto page 1, onto page 2, and then that's page 3, and then page 4. So if I'm like, okay, I want to be able to include rate and gross onto page 1, the scaling option allows you to shrink the font when it comes to printing, not when it comes to your working view. In other words, I could come up here on the Home tab and select it, and then go ahead and change the font size from 10 down to 6 or 5 and make it really tiny here, but for me working in it, that's not helpful. But for printing it off, it'll be helpful because I can fit everything, hopefully, onto 1 or 2 pages, but then that may be so small, those who look at it may need a magnifying glass. So you don't have to be ridiculous about it. We can just go ahead and try to see if we can give it a nudge and scale it down just a bit, so when it prints off, it'll hopefully move that page break over a couple of columns to include all of these columns. So to get to the scaling option, come up here and click on the Page Layout tab, and there it is, Scale to Fit. Right now it's at 100% of the normal font size. You can go ahead and reduce it, and when I do that, watch this vertical page break and see what happens. And when I click on it to go down, hey, just going down to 95% says that it moves the break over to include rate, so that will be included on page 1. How about if we go down to, well, there we go, 85% includes gross. So I'm thinking that's pretty good if it includes gross, and let's look at this, and I scroll down. There's the horizontal page break, so there's page 1 and page 2. Let's go ahead and see if that actually appears in Print Preview, just 2 pages. Click on the File tab, go down to Print. Oh, it's got 3. 1, 2, and 3. It's got a blank page. Now, as we talked about in an earlier training video, when you get a blank page, it means that it's struggling just to get that last bit of data over because, like the margins, it may be just nudging it over, but not enough to push the text over. So you can go ahead and play with your margins, or you can play with the custom scaling. And in fact, you got it right here. Click on the arrow and go to Custom Scaling Options. And there we go. It's at 85%, so you don't have to go to the front stage on the Page Layout tab to adjust it there. We can adjust it here. So if I go down to 80%, let's see how it handles that and click Okie dokie. All right, that was enough to go ahead and cut off the last page and to move everything onto 2 pages. But when I click on to zoom in, ooh, that's tinier font. But still, well, for right now, legible to me. So that's pretty good, unless of course I want to fit it all onto one page. And to do that, I can go ahead and scale it down, or without guessing, let me come down here. You can click on it to go to custom scaling, or, well, you can see it brings up the page setup, or just come down here and click on page setup. Brings up the same window, and you can select fit 1 page wide by 1 page tall. So we're fitting it on a 1 by 1 page, 1 page. When I click Okie dokie, okay, that text is a lot tinier, but does it fit on 1 page? Yes. Click on it to zoom out. How it's going to fit onto 1 page with extra space down below and to the right. And so if we go back to the Page Layout tab, to the Scale to Fit group, notice that the 70% is no longer workable. You can't click up or down because you're adjusting it now by pages. So if I'm like, okay, maybe 1 by 1 page isn't good enough, and you can see when I hover over it in the pop-up for the width, it says you can shrink the width of your printout to fit a certain number of pages, or the height. So if I say, now watch when I change it from page 1 down to page 2, this is going to increase because I'm allowing it to breathe, unloosen the belt, and expand, as it were. So click on the drop-down arrow and go to 2 pages. Now it increases the font from 70 to 81%. Let's see how it handles it. File, down to print. We got 2 pages. Let's click on to zoom in. A little bit bigger, definitely. And because of that, let me click on it to zoom out. It actually fills up a little bit more to the right, so it's not so cut off, takes up more the right margin. And so it requires 2 pages to be able to have larger font. We can go ahead and go back, and then if we want to go back to automatic, and then also change that to automatic, then you get the scale to fit options, so you can go ahead and tweak it that way instead of doing it numerically and selecting how many pages wide or high to be able to adjust it to fit it to a certain degree. Now don't forget, not only can you scale down, but you can scale up. So going up to 125%, look at this page break right here. Let me scroll to the top. It used to be after hours, but before rate, but because I'm making the font larger, not in my working area, which is nice, but larger when I print it off, and then click on File, go to Print. It's going to cut it off. Let me click on it to zoom in. Now that's larger than size 10. It looks like it's size 12. So that way when I print it off, it's legible to those, as opposed to me, and what I've got workable for me at size 10 in my worksheet. If you have more than one worksheet in your workbook, as I do down below, you can see I have a total of 5 worksheets, and you want to find out what worksheet belongs to, in this case, what state. I'd have to click on it to remember, like there's Utah, there's New York. Better yet, let's go ahead and rename the worksheet tabs to those states, and you can do that by right-clicking on it and going to Rename. With it highlighted, just simply type over it, and then hit Enter when you're done, and it accepts it. Another way of doing it is just double-clicking on it really fast, and then with it highlighted, go ahead and type over it. And then you don't even have to hit Enter. You can just go ahead and go to the next worksheet, double-click on it. There you go. Now I can identify them. Not only can you rename them, but you can add color to them. So if you want to categorize them and say, okay, those that are in green, these worksheet tabs means that we're doing great in sales. Those in red, well, we're in the red. Not good. So to go ahead and give them color, just give it a right click, go to Tab Color. You have your theme colors that when you hover over one of them, gives you the name of it. This one's Red Accent 2 Lighter 40%. Ooh, cool. Go ahead and select it. And then when you click off of it, you can actually see the color. The reason why you can't see it readily when you click on it is because that's the active worksheet, so it fades it to let you know, hey, this is the one you're currently working on. Then to go ahead and color the others, if you want to do it without right-clicking on each one, but let's say we want California and New York the same color, you can click on that one, hold down the Control key, click on New York, and so you can see that since I have 2 or more selected, up here on the title bar it says I have a group. When I click off of those selections, it's no longer listed there. So let's come back down here, click on California, hold down the Control key, select New York, right click, and we'll give it the color of bleu. And then I can go ahead and click off. Now it's in bold because I don't have them selected anymore. And better yet, you can also click on the first sheet tab if you want to select them in blocks, and then go down to the last one, like Arizona, hold down the Shift key, click on it, and it selects everything in between. And then I can go ahead and right click and give them all a fun color, the same color of purple, and then click off. Now if you want to add additional worksheets, of course you have the plus button here, so whatever worksheet you have selected here, when you add a new sheet by clicking on it, it adds it next to it to the right of it. There's sheet 1. And in addition to that, instead of clicking on the plus button, you can also right click like on Utah and go up to Insert, and then the blank template selected by default, select it, and then go ahead and click Okie dokie, and it adds it. And because it's in between the color range, it adds the color to it, so it's purple as well. And you've got the generic names, sheet 2 and sheet 1. Now if you made a mistake, you're like, I didn't mean to do that, then you can go ahead and right click on it and delete it. And then if you want to reorder your worksheets, maybe you don't want Utah between California and New York, just go ahead and click on the tab, hold the left mouse button down until you can see that little icon sheet with your pointer there, and then go ahead and move it over. And notice that when I move it, you get this little black triangle pointing down. Wherever 2 worksheets you see it in between, when you let go, that's where it's going to dump it. So if I let it go right there between Arizona and Summary, it dumps it right there. You can do it that way, or you can right click and go up to Move or Copy, because if you have 100 worksheets, clicking and dragging may not be the best option. So you can see the title Move or Copy. If you check the box Create a Copy, it'll create it, but we just want to move it for now. And so with the worksheet that I have selected, Utah, I want to move it before what sheet? Let's move it before, well, there it is, California. Works for me. Click Okie dokie, and it puts it right before California. And of course, copying your worksheets. So for example, if I have a new state that we're making sales in, like North Dakota, instead of retyping everything here, I can go ahead and duplicate it, make a copy of the worksheet, and then just rename it from Utah to North Dakota. To do that, you can right click on it, and go up to Move or Copy, select it, and then check Create a Copy. And then where do you want to create the copy? Before Utah? Sounds good. Click Okie dokie. Gives me Utah 2. I can just double click on it and type over it, ND for North Dakota, hit enter. And then up at the top, rename cell A1 North, hit enter, and then of course we'd update the numbers here to reflect the correct numbers for the cells in North Dakota. You can do it that way, or you can just go ahead and click on the worksheet, hold down the left mouse button, and you get that little icon there. When you hold down the Control key, you get a plus in the middle of that little sheet, that little icon, that when you move it over to the right, where that black triangle is pointing down, and let go of the mouse, hey, we got a copy of Utah 2 as well. Let me go ahead and right click on that and delete it because I don't need it right now. Now this is within this workbook. What if we have another workbook that we want to be able to copy these over into, or even move them for that matter? To do that, let me go ahead and right click on the Excel button down below for managing worksheets, the workbook, and bring up the jump list and go ahead and open up Excel 2016 again. And then up at the top I got a generic name. Let's go ahead and click on the Save As. And scroll up in the navigation pane. We want to select the desktop and give it maybe our European sales workbook. Click Save. And there we go. Let's go back to the original workbook. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and copy these over into that workbook so I don't have to recreate it. And then I can just go ahead and do what I did with North Dakota, update them for the countries in Europe, UK, France, and so on. So I can go ahead and select a range, like let me select North Dakota, and let's say we just want a total of 4 worksheets. Hold down the Shift key and select all 4. Then right click on the selected 4, go up to Move or Copy. Now this workbook that I want to move them to has to be open, because right here it says to what book? Well, not the current workbook, but to the European Sales Workbook. And in that workbook I just have 1 sheet, and so I can either move it before that or just move it to the end after sheet 1. And I can either move it or create copies of it. Let me uncheck it and say if I just want to move them, click Okie dokie. And now I'm in the European Sales Workbook. And you can see we've got North Dakota, Utah, California, New York after sheet 1. And then I can just go ahead and double click and type in France and then update that. And I don't have to recreate the column labels or row headings. And then back in the original worksheet, they're gone. So let me go back to the European. And then click on the first one, hold down the Shift key, click on the last one, right click, go to Move or Copy, and this time instead of moving them back, I'd like to leave them here. So we'll go ahead and check Create Copy, and then instead of going to the European Sales Book, which is what we're currently in, click on the drop down arrow, go back to the Managing Worksheet Workbook, And we'll move them just before the summary. And remember, it's a copy. Click Okie dokie. So back in the Managing Worksheet, automatically takes me there. And you can see we now have them back. Yay! And if you want, you can actually create a completely new workbook based upon the sheet or sheets you have selected down below just by right-clicking on it, going up to move or copy again, and then this time click on the drop-down arrow and say you want that in a new workbook. Well, let's not move it. Let's just create a copy of it and click Okie dokie. Opens up a new workbook. It's over to the right-hand side here. Let me go ahead and click on it to restore it. There it is, North Dakota, copy of it in Book 2. Let me go back to my original workbook, Managing Worksheets. You can see it up in the title bar there. I'm back. And down below, I only have like 5 worksheets, but let me show you another feature that I think you may find helpful. By coming over here, and you've got the horizontal scroll bar, you also have the 3 dots that when you hover over it, you get arrows pointing in opposite directions, that when you click and drag that over to the left, you can open this up more so you've got a longer scroll. But if I click and drag that more so it covers up the other worksheets here, good grief, how am I going to see them? The point being is that not only can you get a longer scroll bar, but let's say that instead of actually expanding it, you have 50 worksheets and it doesn't all fit all the way across before they get cut off. So to navigate around here, you can do it one of a few ways. You can click on the More button and be able to toggle through, or whether you go left or right by toggling, you can use the arrows as well. In fact, when you hover over it, you can see in the pop-up Control left click to scroll to the last sheet. So if I hold down the Control key and left click, it goes right to the very last sheet. And then Control right takes me to the very beginning. And of course, I can toggle through as well. And if you don't want to do that because you want to get to maybe sheet 55, then instead, as it says in the pop-up, right click and you get a list of all the sheets. So then you can go ahead through here, which is a lot easier than that little tiny window of 2 worksheets that you can see there. Go down to your worksheet if you have them numbered, even better. So you can select 55 and then go ahead and we'll do New York. Click Okie dokie, takes me right to it. If you have a workbook that contains like let's say 50 worksheets and you just want to focus on 2 of them, you may want to consider hiding the others, and then when you're ready you can unhide them. So for example, let's say I just want to focus on California and Arizona, and I don't want to toggle back and forth or move my mouse way over here to select it, but have them closer, I can hide those that are in between. By selecting it, coming up here on the Home tab to the Cells group, clicking on the Format drop-down arrow to hide and unhide, and of course you got your hide rows and columns, which we talked about in an earlier training video, but you can hide a sheet. When I select it, poof, it's gone. Now to bring it back, you can come back up here and click on Format and go down to Unhide, or better yet, just give it a right click. That's a lot easier. So you can also hide it and unhide it. Let's unhide it, opens it up. You can double click on it and it's back. And then of course to do block selections or non-consecutive selections for blocks, you can just hold down the Shift key after you select the first one and click on the last one and it selects everything in between, or click off, hold down the Control key, and then you can do non-consecutive selections. So we can skip Utah and Arizona, and then you can right click on that and hide those. And then I can just focus on the 2. And when I'm ready, hey, let's bring them back. Right click, unhide. And unfortunately, you can't hold down the Shift key and select like totals and go to the top to California. You have to actually double click on each one. So right click, unhide, double click, right click, unhide, double click. Now how about entire workbooks? Well, I've got one workbook here. Let me go ahead and right click on the button down below for Excel to bring up the jump list and select Excel 2016. So I have book 3, right click and bring up another one, and I have book 4. So if I have 3 books that are open and I want to be able to focus on the one without closing out the others, then to hide a workbook, just come up here and click on the View tab, go to the Window group and click on Hide. Poof, it's gone. And then of course I can go ahead and let's focus on book 3, go back to Hide Sheets and Workbook, come up here, click on the View tab and do Hide. It's gone. And then the only way to bring it back up is to go to the View tab, and with this last one, click on Unhide. And it looks like we had some other ones that were hidden. Hey, surprise! So not only do we have the original workbook that we first started with in this training video, Hide Sheets and Workbook, but we have book 1, 2, and 4. So to go ahead and bring them back, unfortunately you can't hold down the Shift key and do a block selection with that selected and then clicking on book 4 to select everything in between, you have to go ahead and select them one at a time to bring it back up. OK, then come back up here, unhide, book 1 OK, unhide, book 2 OK, unhide, and book 4 OK, and then we've got a total of 5 books. And then if you have that many workbooks opened and you want to be able to navigate between them, you can do it one of a couple of ways. You can go ahead and click on the corresponding button for the window that you have open above, as we learned in my Windows training video, because for every window you have open, you have the button here that when you click on it, it'll go ahead and take you to it. When you click on it again, it minimizes it down to the taskbar, click on it again, and it restores it and opens it back up. You can do it that way, or up here on the View tab in the Window group, click on Switch Windows. So that way you can see a list there if you don't want to go ahead and click on all those down below. Plus, if you have a lot and you can't see the names on the buttons down below, you got a lot more space here, so it shows a lot more there. Hide Sheets and Workbook, where down below it's Hide Sheets. So I can go ahead and go to book 3, switch and go back to Hide Sheets and Workbook. One more thing to keep in mind is that if I hide my workbook, Hide Sheets and Workbook, go ahead and hide it so it's gone, and I want to go ahead and close out of Excel, close out of all of it. I don't want to save book 4, close out of here. Don't want to save book 2, close out of here. Don't want to save book 1. Then notice the one that we hid that we can't see, we didn't close out of it because we can't see it, right? But because we're closing out of the entire program, it's saying, wait a second, we got something that's hidden from you that's visible to us. Do you want to save it? If I say yes, and then I go, oh, okay, I want to go ahead and open it back up again. By the way, it's right there. And double click on it. And I'm like, it's not here. Well, the first thing you want to check before you really panic is to come up here on the View tab, go to the Windows group and say, oh, April Fools. It's been hidden. Let's go ahead and unhide it. There it is. Select it, click okie dokie, and whew, that was a close one. If there ever comes a time that you want to compare one part of your spreadsheet to another part, but you can't because they're not close enough either together by columns or rows, then go ahead and use the split feature by coming up here, clicking on the View tab, going to the Window group, and it's right there. You can see in the pop-up, it'll divide the window into different panes that each scrolls separately. Before you go ahead and click on it, just take a look of what cell you have selected down below, because it'll give you both a horizontal and vertical split. It'll give it to you horizontally above the cell that you have selected and vertically to the left of the cell that you have selected. So come up here and click on Split, and there you go. You got 4 separate panes that you can scroll around in. For everything to the left of here, you have your horizontal scroll for that side of the vertical split, and for this side you've got your horizontal scroll, and then for your vertical split, everything up at the top is for that scrolly and everything down at the bottom is for this one. And if you want to readjust that, you can go ahead and hover over it until you can see a thick 4-way arrow, and then you can click and drag it and just kind of readjust it anywhere you want. And if you don't want to focus on 4 different quadrants, but just like, let's say, everything to the left of that split and to the right, but not the horizontal, then just go ahead and hover over the horizontal, double click really fast to get rid of it. And if you're not one of those double clickers, well, let me come up here and you can click on the split to remove them all together, click on it again, and instead you can go ahead and click and drag it up and off. So now when I scroll up, I can go ahead and if I hover over the vertical split, drag it over more, and let me go ahead and scroll over more. Now I can go ahead and focus on first name, last name, the rate and gross, not everything that's in between because of the split. And to get rid of that, double click really fast. Let me do it again. Whoop, let me click off. Let me go ahead and double click really fast on it. And then we can go ahead and split it one more time, only this time, double click on the vertical split. And I've got my horizontal, so that way I can go ahead and in the top, let me go ahead and scroll up one more. So I got Max Klinger, and then in the bottom I can scroll down and compare him to somebody else down below, like Mary Allen, who does the same job that he does, but she gets a lot less for it. So let's go ahead and get rid of Klinger and promote Mary, give her a raise. And then again, click and drag off, double click on it, or just click the split to remove all splits, both vertical and horizontal, at once. The freeze panes allows you to go ahead and select a cell, and then when you turn on this feature, it freezes everything above it and to the left of it. So with the cell, when I come up here, click on the View tab, and go to the Window group and click on Freeze Panes. I don't know if you can see the icon there, but the darkened cell there is the cell that you have selected, and if you select Freeze Panes, those other cells to the left of it and above it have lines through it, meaning that those won't move. So when I select it, you can see the splits here and see if this makes sense. So everything above this row is frozen. So if I come over here and I scroll down, I'll always see these first four names with the column labels. And then since everything to the left of it is also frozen, it's these three columns. So when I scroll over to the right, then hey, that kind of worked out well. Now I don't have to like scan past several columns to just go from Max Klinger to gross. That's easier to identify the person and their gross pay, just having it right next door, as it were. Now to go ahead and unfreeze it, we can come back up here to the View tab, to the Freeze panes. It goes from freezing to unfreezing, and we're back to where we were. Now if you want to be able to freeze just a row or a column and not have it doing both, then to freeze a row, like let's say when I scroll down and I'm looking at these columns, I'm like, okay, wait a second. Is this the first name column or the last name? Oh, I can't tell, but what if I can go ahead and freeze this row so when I scroll down, it's always visible. And when I freeze the row, it freezes everything above it. So to freeze just a row, you have to go ahead and select the cell in the first column. Because remember, it's going to freeze everything to the left of it and above it. Above it, that makes sense. We want to keep this frozen here. But to the left of it, since there's nothing there, there's nothing to freeze, so we don't have to worry about that. Then just come up here, click on Freeze Panes, go down to Freeze, and you can see, well, not here because I've got the bottom border, but over to the right it extends beyond it. So when I scroll down, I get down to row 50,000. Hey, I can still look and notice the column labels in 50,000 and say, okay, yeah, this is the first name, that's the last name. Very good. And then by the same token, let's go ahead and unfreeze that, and let's do it for column. So if I want to go ahead and freeze everything to the left of column D, so when I scroll over, I can have rate and gross right next to their names and not have to go, okay, Appleman, they're $835. No, wait, what row am I on? It's best when they're right next to each other, right? So to go ahead and to freeze everything from D over, I can't do it right now because I've got, well, cells A1 through I1 all merged. So let's go ahead and right click on that to unmerge it. Go down to Format Cells, Alignment, uncheck Merge Cells, click Okie dokie. Then the alignment is centered, so it's being cut off. So let's go ahead and go to the Home tab and say not center align, but left align. So now I can see it. So it lines it from the left and pushes it over. And then I can go ahead and select the top cell, the first row, row 1, for column D. So remember, it'll freeze everything to the left of it and above it. Since there's nothing above it, then we don't have to worry about it. It's just going to freeze everything over, so these three columns. Come back up here on the View tab, go to the Window group, Freeze Panes to freeze, and there we go. So you can see the line. When I go ahead and scroll over, I can get right to the rate and gross. And it's easier for me just to go ahead and say, okay, Bob Appleman is earning $44 plus an hour, and that's the gross he earned for that week. And then let's go ahead and unfreeze it. The other two options that you get when you click on Freeze Panes is you can freeze the top row, and the reason why it's there is because it's known as a header row. It's basically you put all your labels in row 1, so Excel can identify that those are the labels for the columns, but there's a way around that, and I don't put my labels in the header row. I put them down below and change the formatting thereof so Excel can identify it that way. We'll talk about that in later training videos. So by default, it's there if you want to freeze the top row if all your labels are in the top row. And you can also freeze the first column. So when you do that, well, there you go. You can see the line for the first column. So when I scroll over, I don't know why I would do it in this database. Maybe it's for a random drawing and saying, okay, hey, I don't know who this is, but number 30, you won 50 grand. Oh, wait a second, you're earning too much. Let's find somebody less. Okay, you've earned 50 grand, so I can be biased that way and not by their names. And we'll go ahead and unfreeze. The multiple worksheet and workbook views means that you can open up additional workbooks to work in different parts at the same time. So I just have one workbook here, but I've got a bunch of worksheets in it. So if I come up here and click on the View tab, go to the Window group, there it is, New Window. And you can see in the pop-up it says open a second window for your document so you can work in different places at the same time. When I click on it, opens it up, and now I have number 2 assigned to it, and back to the original, it's got 1. So if I want to do it again, New Window, now we have 3. And if I want to do it again, View, New Window, I have that workbook opened up 4 times. It's the same workbook, but now I can go ahead and work in different parts of it at the same time. Well, how do you do that? Well, you can come up here, click on the View tab, Go to the Windows group and click on Arrange All. And so we can arrange all these open workbooks. Well, a duplicate of the same workbook opened up 3 times, so we have a total of 4. So we can view them all horizontally, vertically. Well, let's do tiled and click Okie dokie, and hey, there we go. So we got the same workbook opened, but I can't see much of it, so we can come up here for each window and collapse the ribbon so I can see more of them. So then I can go ahead for California. Let me compare it to Utah and bounce back and forth between the two. And then let's go ahead and scroll over here so I can look at New York, and then up here to Arizona. Fancy. So being able to look at all 4 of them at the same time and being able to work in all 4 of them. So what I do in one will update all the others. Well, it's the same thing. It's just that I'm seeing it in 4 different windows here. So if I change California from 200 to 1, and then I come in another window and I right click here and go to California, click Okie dokie, takes me right to it. It's 1, so it updates in all the others. So I can work in different parts of the workbook at the same time by opening up additional windows and then going ahead and tiling them. So when I'm done, then I can just go ahead and close out of one, close out of another, close out of this one. And then when I get down to the last one, restore it, and you can see it doesn't have 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's just the original. And so, well, okay, my ribbon is closed. To bring it back, I can go ahead and double click on the tab really fast and it pulls it back up. And then when I close out of this one, if I want to keep the changes like I did, well, in one of the windows to California to 1, well, make sure you save it. And I made my time more productive with those new windows. As you recall in an earlier training video when we entered in our formulas, like for example in my cell F12 and I want to add up this column, when I hit the equals key on the keyboard and I want to add F7, when I type in F, it brings up the functions down below. Now if that's too distracting for you and you don't want to see it, either you can go ahead and keep typing through it, so we can select the cell and then keep on going, or let me hit the escape key, you can turn it off altogether. To do that, come up here, click on the File tab, go backstage down to Options, select the Formulas category, and it's right there, Formula Autocomplete. Go ahead and uncheck it, so when I click OK and I type in equals F, when I type in a letter, it doesn't bring up the list of functions that begin with the letter F. Cool. Another one that I want to show you when it comes to customizing your formula options is that, for example, you see that little green triangle in the upper left-hand corner of the range here? It tells you that when you select the cell with that green triangle, in the tag here, when you hover over it, that the formula in the cell refers to a range that has additional numbers adjacent to it, and Microsoft's concerned that you didn't include it, in which case you might not have a correct total. Well, if you double click on it, you can see the range is selected here. I don't want to include the employee ID, but Excel can't tell the difference if we want to include it or not. So it's saying, you're missing this adjacent cell that has a number in it. Uh-oh. Let me hit the escape key so I can either click on the tag and say, ignore the error, in which case it removes it, or if I want to turn them off altogether, then come up here, click on the File tab, go down to Options, click Formulas, and it's right there, error checking. So to turn it off altogether, uncheck it, click Okie dokie, and they're gone. But it may be helpful in other instances, not just this. So if I'm like, oh fudge, let me go ahead and turn it back on, come back up here, click on File, whew, getting dizzy, Options, Formulas, and enable it. In fact, we can actually change the color. Ooh, what colors can we get besides green? Maybe hot pink, and then click Okie dokie, and it remembered the one that I ignored, but it gave me the others, but this time in fabulous pink. And then if I want to remember if there was an error here, because I've ignored so many of them, let's say, to bring them all back, click on File. Okay, this is the last time, I promise. Options, Formulas, oh, hold on. Reset ignored, click Okie dokie, and all those that we ignored come back. And you can just select the cell, you get the tag, hover over it, get a synopsis, click on the drop down arrow, tells you formula omits adjacent cells. Or a cell that has a number in it that it thinks should be a part of the formula here, the total. If you have a printout on your desk and you're looking at the numbers down below and then up here on the screen to compare between the two, so you're looking up, down, and you're getting kind of dizzy and you don't have anybody to read the numbers to you, wait a second, Excel does, And you can use that feature by coming up here on the Quick Access Toolbar and customizing it. Right-click anywhere on it, go down to Customize Quick Access Toolbar, change it from Popular Commands to All Commands, and then click and drag the scroll bar all the way down to the S's for, there it is, Speak Cell Speak. Go ahead and select it, click Add, click Okie dokie, and it's right there. First off, go ahead and select your range of cells that you want Excel to speak back to you, and then come up here and click on the Play button.
200, 800, 900, 500.
She's going cell by cell here. Susie, I call her Susie. And then if you want it to stop, hit the Escape key on the keyboard, and it pauses in that cell where it's highlighted. And if you want to pick up to where you last left off, go ahead and click on it again, and it continues on. Hit the Escape key. You get other options besides just playing and hitting the Escape to stop it. You can go back to Customize the Quick Access Toolbar, right-click anywhere on it, go down to Customize, Popular to All, go down to Speak Cells, and in addition to speaking them, you can also stop speaking them, but we hit the Escape key, so that works. You can speak cells by columns, by rows, or on Enter. A name range is a name that you can assign to one or more cells, and it can be referred to in formulas. As you recall, any cell that you select, Excel has its own name, like this is column D, row 13, so up here in the name box, it's known as D13. You can go ahead and give it a name in addition to D13, and why would you want to do that? Well, for example, we've got my mini ghost hunting database. Let's say that I had other databases on the same worksheet, like maybe down on row 50, over on column HH, and I want to be able to jump around from one database to the next. I don't know about you, but I don't memorize the default cell names, like let's see, K40 is where this database is at, but instead let's go ahead and actually have our own names that we recognize for that database. Let me do Control Home to get back to cell A1. And with A1 selected, Ghost Hunting, how about we go ahead and give it a name for this cell by coming up here, clicking in the name box, and typing over it, Ghost space Hunt. Now, it doesn't like spaces when you're giving names in addition to the default name. So when you hit Enter, it gives you the raspberries, and we're like, oh, all right, let's try again. And go ahead and click in it and type in Ghost. Now, if you want the illusion of having a space, hit the underscore key and then type in Hunting. Go ahead and finish it off, hit Enter, and it accepts it. You can see that now, instead of A1 up in the name box, it's Ghost Hunting. Well, you can't see it. It's kind of cut off, but nonetheless, it's there. So when I'm down on, let's say, row 48, column I, and I'm like, okay, I'd like to go to the Ghost Hunting database, just come up here, click on the name box drop-down arrow, and hey, there you go, click on it. Takes you right to it. Fabulous. Now, in addition to the name that we added, it didn't forget its old name, which is A1, Excel's default name. So if I come up in here and type in A1, hit Enter, it takes me to the same cell. And both of these names can be referred to in formulas or functions, which we'll go over in just a minute. Now that we learned how to name a cell, we can go ahead and next name a range of cells. So for example, quarter 1, if I click and drag to select it, now let me go ahead and have a ADD moment. As you recall in an earlier training video, we talked about selecting ranges, that the first cell that's transparent is the active cell of that selected range, meaning that if I go ahead and type in something, it types it in that active cell. So when I hit the Tab key or hit the Enter key, it doesn't tab over, and the Enter key keeps it within that range. So when I get to the end, hit Enter, hit the Tab key, it stays within the selection. So when somebody's reading you numbers off, you can say, okay, let's just focus on here. So whatever key I decide to use, especially the Tab key, it doesn't jump over to the next column. Now, having said that, let me click and drag and do a long selection here. If you want to be able to keep your selection, but toggle between the top and the bottom of the selected range, hold down the Control key and hit the period at the same time. And what it does is it takes the active cell and puts it at the end of the selected range, where this used to be gray. Now it's the active cell transparent. And if I do Control period again, it moves it to the top of the selected range. So that way I can zip up to the top and go, oh, that's right, this is quarter 1. I forgot what column I was in. In addition to that, if you have a different selected range, not just a column, but you actually have rows and columns, when you hold down the Control key and hit the period, it goes left to right and then top to bottom, and then from the bottom corner, when I hit it again, goes back to the left and then right back up to the top. Okay, I digress. Let's get back on target. Let me go ahead and select my range to give it a name. Come back up here in the name box and type in, let's do quarter, let's spell it out, quarter 1, hit Enter. There we go. Now when I click on the drop-down arrow, we have two selected. Well, one's a cell, one's a range. There's ghost hunting, click on the drop down arrow, quarter one, the entire range of the numbers for quarter one. Now you can do it that way, or another way to go ahead and name a cell or arrange the cells is after you select it, come up here and click on the Formulas tab, and there we go, Define Names group. These are all about names. And the one that I want to show you is the Define Name. That gives you more options than just typing it in the name box. When I click on it, opens it up and it says, okay, we've got a name for this range and it's QTR_2, which coincidentally is what I have here. Well, it knows that because my database was built correctly and it can pull in the name for that range. And if you want to go ahead and delete it, name it something else, that's fine. Then the scope of it, do you want it to be available throughout the entire workbook? So if you're on sheet 2 and you click on the drop down arrow to go right to it, or you want to use it in a formula function, do you want to be able to pull that in from sheet 1 onto sheet 2? If so, then just leave the workbook. If not, then just say, okay, this is for sheet 1. So on sheet 2, I'll have another one that will be the same name, quarter 2, but that's not for ghost hunting. That's for some other database on sheet 2, so you can separate them. I'm going to say just have the scope the entire workbook, and then down below you can add comments like, hey, second worst quarter for ghost hunting. What's the deal? In any case, you can add comments, you can have the scope, you can define the name here as well, and also if you want to change what range it's referring to, click on its collapsible dialog box button, you get the marching ants. You can click and drag and select a new range. I'm not going to do that. Just hit enter to pop it back open and click okie dokie. And now we have quarter 2, quarter 1. Let's do another. Let's click and drag and select this range, but use a different feature. Let's come back up here to the define names. And this one's create from selection. Now in order to do this, I need to select more than just the range here. I need to actually select the label, because when I'm creating it from selection, it doesn't automatically pull in the label like the define name feature did. It needs to be pointed out. And so the label for this range here is QTR3. So that's what we need to do in order to use this shortcut, create from selection. Click on it, and then it automatically has top row identified as your label. So the top of this selection is going to be the name for that range. If you're good with that, you don't have a choice. Click okie dokie. And then notice what happens. Now with the selected range, if you look up here, did it say quarter 3? No, because it says the first cell of this selected range is not the actual name of the range, it's the one that's below it. So when I select that, does it say quarter 3? Yay, it does. You can also do that for rows. So if I come over here and I want to add name ranges for New York, Georgia, Utah, California, so everything from quarter 1 to quarter 4, go ahead and click on create from selection. And look at that, it identified with the labels that I have for those rows by checking it off is in the left column. Cool, click okie dokie. And so when I click and drag a range for New York, it's got New York. Oh, that's so cool. It's got Georgia and Utah and California. Now, if you want to do updates or deletions of your named ranges or named cells, then come up here to the Define Names group and click on Name Manager, and it's got a list of all the names within your workbook. You can go ahead and edit one. This is for California, and say, no, it's not referring to this. Go ahead and select a different range, make some comments if you want, click Cancel. And so if you did want to add comments later on and you didn't use the Define Name feature, you can edit them here and update them. Or if you just want to delete one like quarter 3, select it, hit the delete key, click okie dokie, and it's gone. And then notice you can also see your comments here. And if you click on edit, you'll be able to read them in detail. Let me click cancel and close out. And then finally, if you want to go ahead and use that name within a formula or function, go ahead. For example, let's say we want to go ahead and add up the range here for quarter 1. Let's pretend we didn't. And let's come down here and add it right here. Let's come up here on the Formulas tab and click on Auto Sum. And then if you want, you can come over here to the Define Names group, click on Use in Formula, and it has a list of all the names, the least of which is quarter 1. When I select it, automatically selects the range, quarter 1. You can see it's right there. It's not referring to B5 through B8, the default name, but the name that we gave it. Just hit enter and cool. Or you can do it this way if you're not on the Formulas tab and you don't want to click on that to get to Use in Formula. You can type in equals SUM. Hit the tab key to pop it open, and if you remember the name, the first letter in the name, type in Q. Hey, there we go. Remember, you got your list of functions in addition to the names, and you can see the comment that we have for quarter 2. Hey, what's the deal? So with it highlighted, you can just hit the Tab key. It pops it open. You can see the selection, hit Enter, and totally tinsel. And don't forget, you don't have to use your names. You can use the default names if you don't remember. So let's go ahead and double click, and then we can just do, let's see, C5. So type in C5, colon means through, C8, hit Enter, same thing. Only at least with my names, I understand that more than just a range of what's C5 through C8 again. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.